Alright guys, this will be my last Formidable full guide, which is going to be on the Extreme 2 stage versus Kyoto School. Now, I know a lot of you guys have been asking on my channel, requesting a guide on this, and it took me a very long time in order to actually post it. That's mainly because I was trying to set myself a challenge, which is beating the stage using just Gojo as the only DPS. And it was a challenge. It took me awful long time to do it, and I have to spend some serious resources to level up the skills, etc., which I'll show you in a bit. So, you know, I am able to do it, and that's kind of what today's video is going to be about. But as a bonus, I will also be sharing you guys a clip at the end, which is how I'm actually beat the stage with Gojo and also Nobara both in the team. And I'm going to be honest, the second solution with Nobara is going to be so much more simpler and straightforward. So if you do have the option of playing Nobara or maybe like Incomplete Domain Megumi in your team, then please go for my second solution then rather than trying to torture yourself like what I have done and try to beat this with just Gojo as the only DPS. Okay? Now, why do I not recommend of trying the stage with Gojo being the only DPS? It's because obviously the stage you have to fight. It doesn't say here, but basically there's 6 bosses and they're all resistant against blue characters or damage from Gojo. And that's kind of why when you have 6 bosses, it's going to take you an awful long amount of time just trying to defeat even one of them, let's be honest, let alone all 6 of them within the 7 turns your Gojo is on the field. So that's kind of why it took so long. And in order for you to actually have that enough high damage, what you have to do is essentially level up all of the skills on your whole team. So that's kind of why I feel like it's going to cost you guys a lot of resources to actually replicate what I've done, which is why if you do have Nobara, please go for my second solution using Nobara. But if you do really want to try hard like me, what you basically have to do is have your skills, ultimate skill on Gojo to be level 9, buffing skill to be level 8. Then on both your Yaga and Nanami, have their buffing skill to be at level 9 as well. And then for your Toge, your skill 2 have to be at least level 7. So you can see there's going to be some serious resources required in order to just level up the skills so that you can have enough damage to be done. And on top of that, you have to remember my Gojo is actually at 1 dupe as well. So if your Gojo is not even duped up, you probably have to max out all of the skills to level 10 just so that you are able to compensate for the same amount of damage that I am able to show you guys. So that's kind of why it's going to cost you guys a lot of resources to replicate what I've done. Now, what you would also may have realized is that I also have to 3 dupe this recollection. Now, to actually dupe it is not that hard because we do actually get a lot of universal dupes in this game just by beating Formidable Foe content, to be honest. So I think I already gotten like 5 or 6 SSR universal dupes, so that's kind of why I can afford spending 3 of them here because I do feel like it's a very good one to level up anyway. However, once again, that's a lot of resources. Like rather than duping this up 3 times, you could have spent it on 3 separate SSR, right? So once again, that's a decision if you have to make if you really want to replicate the solution I'm going to show you guys now. Now, the way you're going to do it, you can probably already tell by the fact that I'm using this recollection and also Toge, and also the fact there are 6 bosses. If you have watched my guide on how to play Gojo correctly, you would already know in this type of situation, when you have 3 waves or multiple waves, and they're all very strong enemy, i.e. boss enemy, what you should go for is a multi-ultimate strategy. And now because it's a multi-ultimate strategy and there's 3 waves, you kind of need to use your Gojo to release 3 ultimate within the 7 turns he's here. And that's kind of why I'm kind of going all out in terms of ultimate charging. I have Toge to be able to use skill 2 in order to charge up the team. And I also have this recollection to increase everyone's ultimate gauge fill up rate. And I also have this recollection, which I have leveled up all the way to level 77 as well, by the way. Once again, just so that I have enough damage output from the raw stats, but this one is very good in order to charge up your ultimate gauge because it allows you to recover 360% of ultimate gauge with a cooldown of only 4 turns. So I'm actually able to use this twice. Now, if you don't actually want to use this, there's actually a better recollection to use instead of this, which is going to be non-standard with 1 dupe, because that one actually gives you 200 ultimate gauge at the start of each wave. So while it's not as high as this, however, because because you can do this 3 times, it's actually pretty handy. And obviously non-standard is actually very damage oriented recollection, so you're gonna get much better raw stats in terms of how much buff you're going to get to your curse technique, and the recollection itself is going to give you extra damage output when you use your ultimate attack as well. So that's kind of why non-standard is going to also going to be a very, very good choice, possibly even a better choice than this one that I'm showing here. But obviously this one everyone can get it because it's a free SSR that you can get from beating Formidable Foe. So that's kind of what I'm demonstrating using this recollection. Okay, now let me show you the game clip where I actually meant to beat this stage using just Gojo. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, the strategy is kind of that you need to pull up multiple ultimates within the battle. Now, you kind of need to know, first of all, the enemy composition. And basically what you see is that there are 3 waves of enemy. The first wave is just going to be Todo by himself. The second wave, you're going to get 3 enemy bosses. And in the last wave, you're going to get 2 bosses. And that's basically how you there are 6 bosses for the whole duration of this battle. Now, one thing you probably realize is that without Kaito in your team, Yaga and Nanami, there's no way for them to actually stack up buff every single turn. So you need to choose very carefully when do you actually want to start buffing yourself. And logically speaking, when there are multiple enemies together in a single wave, you normally want to make sure you actually one-shot them. Because let's say there's 3 enemies and you fail to one-shot them. What are you going to do next? You are going to then require 3 extra single target attack from Gojo to actually finish off that wave. Whereas for wave 1, it's less of an issue. Even if I don't happen to one-shot Todo by my ultimate, I only need 1 extra single target attack in order to actually finish them off. So that's kind of why for your buffers, it's actually slightly better in this scenario to save up your buffs towards the later stages to make sure that you're actually able to one-shot the waves when there are actually multiple bosses, right? And that's kind of the reason why, as you will see, is that for my Yaga and Nanami, I'll be using skill 1 for their first turn. Now, what you also want to do is obviously, like I said, the main strategy is you want to pull out 3 ultimate within this battle. So you kind of need to know how are you gonna, spread out your ultimate charging ability between your 3 different attacks. And for me, what out of the 3 recollections was no sorry out of the 3 different ways I can increase my ultimate gauge, I have this recollection which have a very long cooldown, so I know I can only use this once in my battle. I have Toge's skill 2, which is able to charge up, and then I also have this recollection which is on Gojo himself, but this one have a short cooldown which is only 4 turns, so I know I can actually use this twice if I use it straight away at the start of battle. And that's kind of why, as you see, what I'm going to do in order to charge up my first ultimate is my decision is that I'm not going to use this recollection on Yagas right now because I want to save it later on when I actually need it. Instead, what I want to do is I want to make sure the recollection on my Gojo is being put into cooldown as soon as possible. And I also know if I just use this by itself, it's not going to give me enough ultimate energy to actually use buffed ultimate attack so quickly, and that's kind of why I need to have my Toge to use his skill 2 on turn 2 as well. Sorry, on turn 1 as well in order to help it out. Now on turn 2, what you're going to see is that I will be starting to buff on my Yaga and Nanami, otherwise I wouldn't be able to even kill Todo. So that's kind of why I started buffing on them. Toge obviously doesn't have enough curse energy, so he will just be doing normal attack. And what you'll see my Gojo doing for both turn 1 and turn 2 is that I'm just buffing himself up because I want to actually be able to do a massive ultimate attack nuke on turn 3. And this is what you're going to see me doing. So obviously Yaga and Nanami, they will be doing their buff as usual. Toge, even though his curse energy is enough for him to use skill 2, because he will be using his buff before my Gojo is able to use his ultimate, there's no point of me charging up everyone's ultimate attack now. So that's kind of why Toge will be using normal attack again. And my Gojo will now actually be using his ultimate, which is gonna be a nuke. Not going to be good enough to actually kill off Todo, but that's fine. Leaving him with a tiny bit of HP and break gauge is actually a good thing, because now what you're going to do is you'll see me trying to charge up my ultimate for the second time round. And basically what you will see me to do on turn 4 is that I will be trying to figure out two other ways to increase my ultimate energy. Obviously the recollection on my Gojo is still on cooldown, so I can't use that method. So what I'm going to do instead is I will be using the recollection on my Yaga, as well as using the skill 2 on my Toge. And now on the top of that, I would also have my Gojo actually breaking and also killing off the enemy boss, which will be increasing my ultimate even further. And that's kind of why on turn 5, what you're going to see is that I already have everyone's ultimate charge up. For Yaga, Nanami, and Toge, this is the first time they have been charged up. But for my Gojo, this is already the second time his ultimate is ready, which is absolutely great. And now is the time when I can do another ult. Now, one thing you have to make sure here is that you want to increase the damage output on your Gojo as much as possible. So what you actually want to do is you actually want to do a combo attack with another character to increase the amount of damage you're able to do. Basically, when you do a combo attack, I can't remember, it's either like an extra 10% or extra 15%, or basically an extra bit of damage will be dealt to everyone getting hit by ult, so you definitely want to chain up, especially in this kind of scenario when the enemies are actually resistant against blue characters. Now, out of all of the ones that I chose to chain, what I decided to do is to do it on one of the buffers. I chose Yaga first. The reason why I do it on one of the buffers is that I took a look at how much curse energy they have left. I would then realize that eventually, even though they can still buff this turn, next turn they will run out of curse energy anyway. So rather than trying to use both of their buff right now and then next turn having both of them using their ultimate attack but doesn't actually chain up with Gojo, it's actually a better idea for me to just have one of them using their ultimate attack for a chain and then the other one buff, and then the next turn we can alternate and then have someone else use his ultimate attack and then chain while the other buffer start buffing. So that's kind of what I decided for my Yaga to use his ultimate attack. Out of the three, the bulkiest one is going to be Miwa because she's a tank, so that's kind of why I chose Miwa. And then for other character, my Nanami will obviously be buffing. My Toge, once again, there's nothing for me to do because first of all I don't have enough curse energy. Second of all, my Gojo is already full in terms of his ultimate, so there's no need for me to do anything other than a normal attack on my Toge. Now, what you then see me do here is that my Yaga actually done quite a lot of damage on Miwa, which surprised me a bit. But then obviously the main killer is going to be the nuke, the ult from my Gojo, which once again is able to wipe out wave 2 completely. So once again, that's very good. And now that will bring us to turn 6 and also onto the third wave. Now, on the third wave, what you're going to see is that I need to find two ways to increase my ultimate energy again. Obviously, the recollection on my Yaga is gone, but that's fine. Yaga can start buffing. Now, my Nanami no longer have that buff, enough curse energy or curse energy to buff. So what I'm going to do instead is I will use his ultimate attack. Now for my Toge, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to chain it because I want to save his ultimate attack to chain with Gojo next turn. So I'm not going to use Toge's ultimate attack even though it's ready. Instead, what I'm going to do is obviously to use his skill 2 in order to increase the ultimate gauge for my Gojo. And obviously I also would use my Gojo's collection for the second time around to give him another buff in terms of the ultimate energy. And with all of those, I am then able to hopefully charge up my ultimate for the third time and just ready for the last turn in order to actually wipe out wave 3. So as you can see here, once again, Nanami done surprising amount of damage to, I don't know whether the bosses in second wave and third wave are just weaker, but it seems to done a lot of damage already. And now what you see me doing is I'll be chaining Toge's ultimate attack with Gojo's ultimate attack to go for that third ultimate nuke and just wipe out the third wave of bosses. Okay, now let me show you the second game clip of how to actually beat the stage now using Nobara as well as Gojo. You'll see this is going to be far simpler than trying to beat it with just Gojo himself, and that's kind of why this is kind of the solution I recommend, especially if you do actually have Nobara or incomplete domain Megumi to actually have that color advantage for the stage. Now the strategy of this is kind of you need to know when to actually use your ultimate attack. Obviously, you want to spread out your Nobara's ultimate attack and your Gojo's ultimate attack so they actually hit on different waves and all capable of AoE nuke one of the waves. Now, wave 2 in this stage have 3 enemies and wave 3 only have 2 enemies. Gojo's ultimate attack is just an AoE no matter what. However, for Nobara, she actually needs time to set up her nails before turning her ultimate attack into an AoE. So that's kind of why when there are only 3 enemies, Nobara actually needs to take 3 turns in order for that nuke to work. Because what she needs to do is she needs to set up her nails on 2 of the enemy and then use her ultimate on the third one. Whereas on wave 3, when there are only 2 enemies, she only needs to take 2 turns because she can just set up on one enemy and then nuke on the other. And that's kind of why you would ideally want your Nobara to uh, use her ultimate attack on turn 7 and then set herself up on turn 6, and then working backwards, your Gojo need to do his AoE nuke using his ultimate attack on the wave 2 on turn 5. So you basically just want to work backwards, etc. Now, in terms of what you want to do is obviously for Todo on wave 1, because you need your ultimate attack on your Gojo to be ready by turn 5 for that nuke, you first of all need to kill off Todo in the first 4 turns. The second thing you need to do is make sure your Gojo actually has charged up enough ultimate energy so that he actually have his ultimate ready on turn 5. Now, if you actually use the reflection, which can increase ultimate gaining speed, etc., then this will be less than worry. But without them, what I found out is that Gojo wouldn't actually have quite enough to charge up naturally by himself. What Gojo actually needs to do is he actually needs to kill off the enemy boss so that he can actually get a bit of extra boost from the fact that he broke or killed off an enemy, and that's basically what's going to give him enough ultimate energy for him to actually be ready on turn 5. So it's very important that your Gojo actually kill off enemy Todo here. Now if we work backwards again, what you would then see is that I need to use my ultimate attack on turn 5 on Gojo, and then on turn 4 for my Gojo I need to kill off this enemy boss. Now if you are using a reflection such as what I'm doing, which is Pride, which only lasts for 2 turns, I can't end up wasting loads of my attacks on the enemy, because I, rather than wanting to spread out my attacks and eat up my buff on my reflection, what I actually want to do is I want to save up my reflection buff for my ultimate attack, because I need to make sure it's actually able to one hit KO the entire wave 2. So Pride naturally only gives you 2 turns of effect, or 2 times of buff effect on himself for curse technique attack. One of them I need to save up for my ultimate. That basically means I can only use one other curse technique attack in the first 4 turns on my Gojo, and naturally that will be on turn 4 when I actually need to kill off the enemy boss. So what that basically means is that in order to maximize the amount of damage on turn 4, once again I'm going to work backwards. In order to maximize that damage, my Gojo need to be buffing himself up on turn 2 and turn 3, because his buff actually lasts for 3 turns. And what that also means is that on turn 1, my Gojo can do whatever he wants, because even if I chose to buff himself, that buff would expire by turn 4 when I need to use his curse technique anyway. So that's kind of why I chose to do a bit of a chip damage on my Gojo, just to do a tiny bit of damage using his skill 2, which is a melee attack and doesn't actually eat up the effect from his reflection. Now in terms of the other character, my Yaga and Nanami were using their skill 1 because I want to save their buffs for later on, so I can constantly use their buff towards the later stages of this battle. And then for my uh, Nobara, I chose to use her skill 2 on the first turn, because her skill actually, the buff actually lasts for 4 turns, so it's kind of worth buffing herself up first, because then you are benefiting it for the next 3 turns, which is definitely worth it in my opinion. So that's kind of why I chose to use her skill 2 for the first turn. Then skill on the second turn, she now actually need to start wearing down the enemy, otherwise Gojo won't be able to kill enemy boss off. So that's kind of why you'll see on turn 2, my Nobara is going to use her skill 1 to do a bit of damage, and my Gojo is now going to be start buffing. On turn 3, you repeat the same. So Gojo, Yaga, and Nanami will all be buffing, and Nobara will be doing a bit of chip damage. Then what you want to do is on turn 4, Yaga and Nanami will still be doing their buff. Your Nobara would have enough curse technique, curse energy to actually do a bit of a more higher damage, and you would need that, otherwise Gojo won't be able to one-shot the enemy with his skill 1. So that's kind of why Nobara is going to use skill 3 this time to wear the enemy down by quite a bit, and that basically allow your Gojo to kill the enemy and charge up his ultimate attack. And then what you'll see is then obviously on turn 5, which is the second wave, Gojo have his ultimate attack ready, which is ready for me to do a nuke. Now, I actually done a bit of a chip damage on Miwa because I wasn't actually sure whether my Gojo was able to one-shot it. But ideal scenario, if you know your Gojo is able to one-shot this entire wave, what you should be doing on your Nobara is actually charge herself up, because once again, her buff lasts for quite a few turns, so it's a good idea for her to actually charge herself up for that turn, because Gojo is going to nuke anyway. And when she does actually buff herself up, it will be valid by the time she uses her ultimate attack on turn 7. So that will be the right way of playing it. I just wasn't sure because that was the first time I tried this stage, so I wasn't sure how much damage my Gojo could actually do, etc. Okay, then on this turn, basically what you realize is that I ran out of curse energy on my Yaga and Nanami, so they will just be doing their skill 1. And then my Gojo will just be doing attack on one of them, and what my Nobara is doing is I will be setting up the skill, sorry, her skill 1, which is the nail on one enemy, and then what you'll see me do on the second turn, on turn 7, is that I will be using her ult on the enemy without the nail stack, and naturally what that basically means is that both enemies will be getting hurt. And then for my Gojo, you also want to do a bit of a single target attack on the other enemy, which he didn't attack on turn 1, just in case Nobara's ultimate wasn't ready to actually kill off both of the bosses this turn.